Well, welcome back to Character Study. I am John Fortt here with Dave Tieche.
Hey.
Yeah. And we've been doing a series on characters, but mainly centered on Abraham and looking through scripture, through the Bible, at who he is as a person, how he relates to God, what we learn from that about how God relates to us. And it's not just Abraham, of course. There's Sarah, there's Hagar, there's Lot, there's Isaac. We're going to talk about today as well. We talked about Lot's wife kind of as a character. So a lot has happened to our hero Abraham since God called him up and said, I got a AAA triptych for you, but I'm not going to show it to you. I know where you're going.
That's a reference 4% of people are going to get, John.
Yeah, I know. You kind of had to be around pre-MapQuest.
Pre-MapQuest.
Yeah, forget about Google Maps or Waze. I'm talking MapQuest. Back when you had
I remember
us in your car.
I remember us driving like a 17-hour drive from our college to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and you had the triptych and you were the navigator. It was like
that's right.
It's just insane to think about how things have changed. Anyway, yes, Abraham had less than a triptych.
Less than a triptych. And for those of you who missed an earlier episode or haven't guessed, Dave and I have been friends for 30 plus years now. So that was a reference to college and his 85 red Honda Prelude. There you go.
With the tape deck.
Yeah.
You made a mixtape for us to listen to as we traveled. I still have it.
I did indeed. You still have it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We didn't know that Dollywood existed until we were stuck in traffic driving through the Great Smoky Mountains. We're like, there's a theme park by Dolly
Parton
in the mountains. I'm not going to make that joke,
nope.
But
there is a joke there. But
there's a joke there, but we're not going to, because this is a Bible related podcast, character study. And we're talking today about Isaac. And of course, Abraham's still in there. But one of the better known, perhaps really the best known sub story within the story of Abraham, Genesis 22, God has earlier promised an old guy, Abraham, and his older wife, Sarah. You guys are going to be the parents of a great nation, but they don't have kids. They're past childbearing age. Abraham ends up having a kid with Hagar, and God's like, that's not it. That's not the promise.
Yeah.
I promise you something different. They finally have Isaac. And then in Genesis 22, God says, Abraham, in verse 1, Abraham says, here I am. God says, now take your son, your only son, Isaac, which is interesting because Abraham does have another son, Ishmael. But Isaac is the only son of the promise, right? So I'm interested in your thoughts on that. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go into the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will tell you of.
Yeah, before we get in, I wanted to point out, you're right. This is one of the best known stories. It was interesting. In my research on this, theologians, they all go back to Genesis 12, and they call it like the grand central station of the biblical narrative with the call of Abraham. But artists and poets through the centuries, this is the story they focus on because it's so full of the raw human emotion. And so I just think that that's really interesting, that this is the most depicted moment in Abraham's life through art and poetry and story throughout the centuries. And so this is probably the best known story in Abraham's life. Yeah. So it's just fascinating.
Narratively, in the Bible, like if this were one of the 60s, 70s Batman episodes, right, where it always ends with a cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah.
Is this the end of the dynamic duo? Like when they're tied up in the rope over the bubbling cauldron and, the Joker is like, ha, 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 ha. And then, as a kid, somehow you never know, it's going to end right here. Like this episode, tune in next time, same bat times, right? This is maybe the first and most extreme cliffhanger version of, oh my goodness, what's about to happen? There's that moment, right? So if you're an artist, you're going to depict something. You want tension, you want action, you want characters, you want setting, right? You want it to mean something. The Last Supper is one of those moments where you got Jesus sitting in the middle of the table and, the disciples flanking him. And I'm sure the table wasn't really that long, but the Italians had fun.
Like
with
a table for 24.
Yeah, I mean,
Wait. Why 20? Do 24? Now we're all going to sit on one side.
Yeah, was there a TV on the other side? Why are they all facing the same way? That's probably not really.
It was a sports bar.
Yes, there you go. I mean, it was a big weekend. So this is one of those scenes in Genesis 22 that we're going to get to, but where there's this dramatic tension because there's this huge lesson that you're about to learn. And I would argue that even more in terms of narrative construction, this is kind of a cause effect big moment where boom, Last Supper, it's like, oh well, tomorrow stuff's going to happen. This is like in mere seconds.
Yeah.
Unless God intervenes or the batarang, right, comes out and swings around this rope, our heroes are in trouble.
I think it even goes even further. I mean, it's a great description, but I would say it even goes even further. And that is Soren Kierkegaard, the great Danish theologian, says that the net effect of this story is to produce horror in us. He wrote that in his book, Fear and Trembling, that the idea is that this is a terrifying story, and it produces so much emotion because of what is being asked of Abraham, the terror of it. And there's the staggering human emotion that's in this. It really produces tremendous tension inside. And some people are like, to the point where it short circuits them. Like they're like, if this is what God's like, I want nothing to do with this. And if you don't look at it closely enough or don't understand or don't delve into it, I can imagine it having that effect. A God who requires infant sacrifice is that a moral monster? Is God a moral monster? And that revulsion from a human level makes tremendous sense. And it's all in this story because it starts with sometime later, God tested Abraham. Tested. Like, what kind of sick God is this, right? So if we don't tease apart what the word test means, if we don't get through the story, if we don't like stare at it and really unpack it, it can have that effect on us. And so that's all that's in the story.
Because in the name of finding out what Abraham's really made of, God is going to not only allow something bad to happen,
right,
but seem to be complicit in it.
Right.
God is telling Abraham to do something
heinous,
horrible.
Yeah.
And I put this in parallel with the story of Job. Right. And at the beginning of the book of Job, gathering of the angels, Satan shows up. I don't know, party crasher. I guess, he had his old ID and decided he would try it at the door.
He snuck in.
Yeah. And God's like, have you considered my servant Job? God brings him up. Thanks, God. Just minding my own business, being a good dude. And you're talking to the devil like, hey, look at this guy. And seems to, well, not only seems to, but invites a series of tragedies, including the death of Job's children. So when we're talking about the death of kids as being the ultimate like destruction of hope, generational promise, right? We have that parallel also. The ultimate, I think, book of the Bible story that questions things about the goodness of God, the futility of faith, like all these things. And then, of course, as Christians, we can't help but see the echoes in verse 2. Now take your son, your only son.
Right. Yeah, you're jumping ahead, but it's interesting what you just said. You made the tie to Jesus. And what's interesting is sometimes I as I did all the reading on this, the Jewish theologians, they stay anchored in the text and try to mine it for what it is. And they're actually very comfortable with being so deeply uncomfortable. What does this reveal? Sometimes the Christian theologians almost gloss over it and spiritualize it too quickly. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so they jump almost too quickly, and they actually fail to see the depth of pain and emotion. Like, this is the end of the line, to your point, for the broader mission of God himself. It's come to a screeching halt if Isaac dies, right? He is the sole bearer for the promise of the future. And the end of Isaac means the end of the line for all that hope and blessing, not just for Abraham, but for what God says is the entire world. This is a very, very big deal narratively and personally. So again, not trying to gloss over that and just kind of pretend,
I'm glad we're talking about this. I still have just real problems with this story. And I think maybe we're supposed to, but there have been right up through modern day stories of people with mental illness who've killed their kids.
Sure.
Saying that they heard God telling them, like
Sure.
in Genesis 22, testing them to do it. And, this is character study. And I'm kind of trying to think, well, what does this say about Abraham? What kind of a person would go through to the brink of acting out this command of God to kill your child?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to pass judgment here on saying that I understand exactly what it means. I'm saying I really I understand the spiritual explanations. I've read the commentaries. As a dad, I still don't get it.
One of the things that struck me in the story is like, we just read a couple chapters earlier when there was like a city that God was going to destroy, right? Abraham gets up and puts forth this impassioned plea for the villainous citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah. He protests and begs and barters as kind of like almost like a prophetic, caretaker for this villainous city. And yet when it comes to his own son, nothing, no protest, no pushback. Like it's very hard to make sense of from an emotional level. And it's especially juxtaposed against what we just saw in Sodom and Gomorrah. And his silence, I think that's also a form of horror. It's like the silence of everyone in the face of unspeakableness. It's hard to make sense of.
Well, let's get more into the biblical narrative and the specific scripture so we can start to unpack some more of this. Verse 3, Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son. He split the wood for the burnt offering and rose up and went to the place of which God had told him. I think that's interesting too, by the way, because God did tell him about this place. When we first meet Abraham and God is telling him to go to a place, he's like, go to a land I will show you. But there's more specific. This horrible thing, there's a lot more specifics.
Sure.
On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place far off. Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship and come back to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. He took in his hand the fire and the knife. They both went together. Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, my father. He said, here I am, son. He said, here's the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they both went together.
Yeah, I find it interesting. There's some real parallel construction here, it seems to me. Like when he says early in Genesis 12, leave your country, your people, your father's house, go to the land I'll show you. And then in this, he says, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the mountain I will show you. It seems like we're talking about the same kind of faith trust here. It's the same kind of thing that's happening, except the stakes are now exponentially more, But in some ways, they're at least adjacent. Leaving the land that is a form of self-death. It's like it's uncertain, it's scary as heck, and there's certainly scary beyond that. It could result in your death. And going up to this mountain is going to be worse. So right. It's adjacent, but it's worse.
Well, in the first case, it's leave the family that you came from.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's kill the family that came from you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. So I see that parallel too. And, once again, there's this higher place and lower involved, and
mountains are really important in the scriptures. Mountains are where people go to meet God. The high places are the places where it's super clear all through the scriptures and also through the ancient world. People would try to get to high places because they believe that's where it was thinnest. that the supernatural realm and the physical realm would somehow meet. The mountain of God is like, it's all the way back in Genesis and Eden. That's where God kind of is. God meets with, Moses later on, and at the top of a mountain. Jesus goes to the top. I mean, these mountains are real key areas where we meet with God. So
Yeah, Elijah.
right, but we're not there yet in the story. But this is
Right.
it's going to be a monster theme. The idea of a mountain, the mountain of God, where you go to meet God. So that's even more confusing. I'm going up to meet with God, and this horrible thing's going to happen. It's commingling something horrible with something important and beautiful and transcendent, which makes the mixture. It's like frosting your cake with cat poop. It's revulsion, even if the cake is good. It's like, what exactly is happening here?
Yeah.
That was a
So
gross metaphor. I'm sorry.
it's okay. I have a cat. She's right over here lounging, and
Oh, really?
it really hit home for me.
Oh,
Yeah. Verse 9, they came to the place which God had told him of. Abraham built the altar there and laid wood in order, bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar, on the wood. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. Yahweh's angel called to him out of the sky and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am. He said, Don't lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked and saw that behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham called the name of that place, Yahweh will provide. As it is said to this day, on Yahweh's mountain, it will be provided.
yeah. So pretty quick story. It's an economy of words. There's no emotional words in here. Abraham says less than 45 words throughout the entire thing. The narrative action just keeps marching ahead in this repetition. It's terrifying. And I mean, this story is a masterclass in storytelling, tremendous tension. And that's where we have. So we have the resolution, but you're saying that this resolution doesn't actually provide you with much emotional support.
Well, part of the reason why is, what about Isaac? Right? He's an actual person, kid, maybe early teens. Tweed,
yeah, that's a question. How old is Isaac? And that's been debated. When you think about it, I mean, the text kind of doesn't say. It says he's young. What sometime later? I mean, it doesn't give us a whole lot. When you think about it, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you pointed out that some people think, well, he must have been old enough to help with the wood and stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess they did take two guys with them, and there was a donkey. But Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac, his son, right? This is as they're traveling, not when the sacrifice is happening, back in verse 6. So if Isaac is big enough to have the wood laid on him,
yeah,
he's probably, pretty close to being a teenager.
Yeah.
Right. If they're going to trek up there, as you pointed out.
Yeah. The story only gives us he's old enough to be and strong enough to carry the wood and young enough to be kind of compliant, and not ask too many questions,
Although, as we'll later learn in scripture, even when Isaac is older, he's kind of compliant.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Like he sort of gets a fast one pulled on him by his wife and his tricky son, youngest son, Jacob. And he's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Blessing time. Right. Okay, sacrifice time. All right, let's see how this ends up.
I was looking into this. It's and people all over. There's not a whole lot of biblical information in here. The Jewish historian Josephus wrote that Isaac was 25. I don't know why he wrote that. I don't. Maybe they were talking about it, but that's in history texts. And the Talmud proposes that Isaac was 33, which coincidentally same age as Jesus when he died. Other theologians have posited he was still young. So we're not really sure. I think the idea that he's old enough to carry the wood, young enough to be compliant, some bar mitzvah kind of age makes a tremendous amount of sense to me, or right before the bar mitzvah, 12, 13, something like that. I think about your son, your youngest, Benjamin, that seems in my head close enough, but he's not like 5.
Right.
So
And I wonder in this story, does Isaac have faith in God, or does Isaac have faith in Abraham?
I mean, that's the bigger question. Is this story a test about Abraham, or is it a test about God? And that's another question.
Well, I think we know that at minimum, it's a test about Abraham, because in the beginning, verse 1, after
Abraham,
these things, God tested Abraham. Like
yeah.
we know that, but rightly or wrongly, I think in our own hearts, it's a test about God too.
It is, absolutely.
So, but the reason why I ask is, does Isaac have faith in God or faith in Abraham? Is because the scripture doesn't talk about this. But what happens to the relationship after this? Because here's a kid who has perhaps experienced the ultimate earthly betrayal. He wasn't wrestling with it. He wasn't agonizing over it.
Yeah.
He was just going to stab me with a knife and burn my corpse. Right? My dad was going to do that to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe if I'm imagining I'm Isaac in that situation, I'm thinking, did mom know?
She's not a part of the story, and I think we know why.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe we don't tell mom about this one.
But if I'm Isaac, I'm thinking, did she know?
Yeah.
Or did dad just go?
Did not.
Yeah. But do you really think that Isaac goes back and keeps this a secret?
No. Hey, you'll never guess what happened, Mom. Worst vacation ever.
So we don't know. But imagine what the relationship is if he didn't keep it a secret, right? Mom, did you know? How could you? Oh, you didn't know. Oh, okay. Then what's up with that? Like that. Yeah. Imagine what the relationship is if he did keep the secret. Imagine they just never told Sarah. Imagine they just never told
the secret. Yeah.
Anybody else until Moses wrote it down.
Yeah.
What is that to hold?
And that also would obviously hurt the relationship, because you're withholding from your own mom this incredible moment in your life. Incredible, terrible, incredible, traumatic, whatever the word you want to say. Yeah.
I'm going to guess, and I have no scriptural basis for this, but I'll tell you my sort of intellectual basis for it. I'm going to guess that Isaac actually didn't tell Sarah, and that this dysfunction lingered in the family. And the reason why I'm going to guess that is because a generation later, Isaac's older son is going to want to kill his younger son. That death, that life taking within the family,
the seed
passes on.
Yeah, the seed never gets fully dealt with.
So I don't know. Like, clearly this is
and also you could also say that there was. I mean, we're getting it. We're not there yet. But if you think about the story of Isaac and Rebekah, there's a little bit of a duplicity and distance between that married couple, and that might mirror the Abraham and Sarah split or separation because of this event. We're conjecturing here, but the seeds do seem to be, if you track the storylines, I guess you could say.
And the reason why I think about it that way, even though David, in scripture did take responsibility for his sin with Bathsheba, and with having Bathsheba's husband killed, in the next generation with Absalom and Amnon and Tamar, the themes play out again. Right? So
the cycle themes.
Yeah. That's sort of what I'm thinking of when I'm thinking about. Yeah, God deals with us individually. God forgives, faith shines through, but sometimes in our flesh and in our families and in our parents, if we don't deal with these real dynamics of character and emotion, they get passed on.
Yeah.
So I wonder about Isaac here, and what kind of we know the faith challenge that Abraham faces in this, but what about the faith challenge that a son faces when he realizes what his father really values and what his father is willing to do?
Well, okay, so let me try to pull back a tenth, kind of zoom up a little bit, because it does seem pretty clear that this story is about Abraham. it is about the testing of Abraham. But to our point that we've been talking about, and your point, it's also about God. Like, what's this God actually like? Is he the kind of God who's going to require one of his followers to do something heinous? And all the commentators throughout the ages, as people, theologians and artists and poets have meditated on this, they see this kind of idea that Abraham is a prophetic reenactor, that there's a prophetic reenactment. There's a moment when he stands over Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's kind of acting like what God wants his humans to act like, right? He's begging for the city. He's pleading for it. He's willing to sacrifice himself and go down. We see even with Lot, he's willing to ride into danger to rescue this foolish guy who got himself in a jam. So there's a prophetic reenactment there. God's going to ride in and get us out of jams, right? And here we have actually the worst prophetic reenactment. It's kind of like, oftentimes, and we're going to see this throughout the rest of the scriptures, prophets basically play the role of God to the people, right? Like Hosea has to marry a prostitute and buy her off the slavery auction bid. He's playing the role of God there because we're just like the harlot that sleeps around, and God is faithful to us even when we're unfaithful to him. Jeremiah breaks like these jars of clay, and that's supposed to be like that God is going to break Israel. Ezekiel does like 5 prophetic reenactments. One of them's, some of them are super weird, like he eats food baked over poop, animal excrement, because it's like filthy, and this is like the offerings of
Back to the cat poop. That's a great callback.
Right, yeah. Isaiah walks around naked for like a couple, I think it's a couple years, just to show that anyway, these which is strange, but they're basically kind of playing the role of God in front of people to show people what God's really like. So if that's kind of what's going on here, then which father are we talking about and which son are we talking about? Because what happens at the end here is there's a switch, and if Abraham's supposed to stand in for us or for God, and then Isaac is supposed to be God's son, that's kind of like us, then we are spared from the sacrifice and something else is killed, and there's a male lamb caught in the thicket, and the ties to this lamb, this male lamb, this ram is Jesus. And so at the end of the day, it's God who will be losing a son, not Abraham. It's Jesus who dies, not us. It's God who actually provides. And when he provides, and that's the whole message of this, God provides. And what does he provide? A sacrifice. And how does God provide that sacrifice? Through incredible cost of his own son.
Yeah, I think part of what's hard for me about this is that in Genesis 22, the ram in the thicket, this isn't a PETA situation, right? We don't have people for ethical treatment of animals. Right. The ram is totally disposable. It's like, oh, great, there's a carrot. Just munch on the carrot, right? We're not like, oh, no. This isn't a Bambi's mom and the hunter type. Oh, no, there's a little, right? So in a way, if Abraham is standing in for God, then in a way, Isaac is standing in for Jesus, his son, his only son. And in the New Testament scenario, Abraham actually goes through with it, right? With the difference being in the New Testament, Isaac, Jesus, is fully aware
and fully willing
of what's going on.
Yeah.
And fully compliant. Willing, yes, but no, not my will, but thine be done. So like fully compliant, fully obedient.
Yeah.
But his will, the implication is in that statement, would be different. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, what's interesting is both sons carry wood. They on their back. They both march up a hill. They're both killed. They're both sacrificed. So the similarities between Isaac and Jesus are they're both beloved sons, to your point earlier. They're both the only son, your only son whom you love. We see Jesus being spoken of by like that at his baptism. The Father says, "This is my son with whom I love and whom I'm well pleased." So the ties between Isaac and Jesus are explicit in the later part of the biblical narrative. We don't get a whole lot of insight into Isaac's mental state. He is obedient, but we do get quite a bit into Jesus's, and he's also obedient. I mean, he begs God not for it to happen in the garden if there's any other way, but then he capitulates, sweating blood, and says, "But not my will, but yours."
So that's what I mean. I don't mean to state that Jesus is unwilling. I think there's a difference between being proactively willing and being unwilling, right?
Well, it's not like he's happy about it. I mean, it's gonna have tremendous cost to him, and there's anguish there, right?
Yes, and for there are reasons, I think reasonably, why in the biblical narrative that is shown. It's not like Jesus is stoic or emotionless about this whole scenario.
100%. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
No, this is life. It's a video game. I got more lives. He's not like that. Like, this is actual.
It's a video game. I got more lives. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, you would think, oh, he's all knowing. Like, he knows how this is going to end. So whatever. It's painful, but he's God, and so pain is whatever. No, like, this is actually agonizing.
Right.
And he's like, I'd rather not.
Yeah, the terror of Jesus's death is profound, right? And it's super clear through the passion narrative. You're 100% right. But I think we're supposed to see later on we're supposed to make the tie between Isaac and Jesus. And I think that's fascinating to me,
So I do wonder, Isaac continues to serve God after this. So, and we know that not least because even after he's out from under his parents' responsibility, he's found a wife, etc., he's blessing his sons with a blessing rooted in belief in God, right? So I think if Isaac were a certain type of person, this would have been a big break rebellion moment. Like, screw this.
Yeah, no way.
Right? What kind of God is this?
Yeah, I'm out.
Right? Like, God's gonna kill me, and just to test my dad. Forget that. I'm doing something else. Isaac doesn't do that.
Yeah. Well, we have two more. Okay, first of all, there's two more data points that we haven't put in here, and I think they're kind of interesting. First of all, we have earlier in the narrative, Abraham says something really curious. He says to the servants back in verse 5, stay here with donkey. I and the boy are going to go over there to the mountains. We're going to worship. We're going to worship Yahweh. And he says, and then we will come back to you. All right. So later on in the book of Hebrews, the author of Hebrews, whoever that was, a brilliant theologian, says, by faith, this is in Hebrews 11:17. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promise was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it's through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. And then this verse, Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so in a matter of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the death. The idea is that Abraham has seen, this is Yahweh, a creator God who can bring life where there is no life. He did it with with his wife, Sarah, with her barren womb. He can just bring life where there is no life. That's what he does. So if I kill him, he's gotta somehow bring him back. That's what the author of Hebrews reasons. And and we actually hint at that at the very beginning of this narrative. So there's it's terrible. Like, you have to kill him and he brings it back. But that's what the author of Hebrews says. That is in kind of Abraham's reasoning. This is a God who brings life where there is no life ever before. So I don't understand this at all. But apparently this God can bring life from death. And of course, that's what we find later on in the story. So that is a data point that is, I don't know how worth considering. It doesn't make it any less terrible. But it is an interesting biblical data point.
I mean, how messed up would this story be if that actually happened?
Oh, if he killed Isaac,
yeah. And then God was like, all right, do over. Here he is. Here's zombie Isaac. Go back with him.
Well, to be fair, that's what happened with Jesus.
Well, no, in the sense that God didn't publicly execute him with his bare hands.
Oh, that's true.
And then, right?
That's what he did.
Well, it was sort of Jesus taking on the sins of
Right.
world, and the people were sort of culpable in
Right.
executing him, because it wasn't God on God's own being like, hey, watch this.
Right. The
Right.
whole point of salvation, I think in general, is rescue. That we actually don't have to pass through death. That's the whole point of it. And that God passes through death on our behalf, or in this case, Jesus, God's son. That's the whole point of this,
But I got to go back to, once more, the your only son part. What about Ishmael? Right? I understand Ishmael is not the son of the promise,
Right.
but Isaac is not Abraham's only son. Like, this would be a lawsuit today, right? Ishmael would be like, all right, like, I know you're telling a story here, but technically, not only is Isaac not the only son, he's not even the firstborn, if we're being technical, right?
Right.
So why does it say that?
Well, it's we see from it, I don't know, but I think what we're supposed to see is that he's been, in essence, disinherited, right? And so if he's disinherited, then he has no father, but God says, I'm actually going to take care of him. So for everyone who's ever been, abandoned or disinherited, God says, actually, I'm going to look out for you. So even though he doesn't have an earthly father who's taking care of him, God actually makes that promise to his mother. And she responds in worship and says, you clearly have seen me, and you're out here taking care of me, and you're taking care of my boy. Because remember, they were both going to die in the desert, right? She couldn't even look. It was so painful and so horrific, right? So that's another situation where a parent thinks that their kid's going to die,
Yeah.
And God comes through and spares her sorrow upon sorrow, but also provides. And she says, and she names him, you're the God who sees. So we have Jehovah, the seer, and here we have Jehovah Jireh, God the provider, or Yahweh Yara, which is God will provide. It's also worth noting, we didn't say this, the mountain they walk up, later there would be a city built on this exact mountain. That city is Jerusalem. And outside that city walls is where Jesus would walk up. It's the exact same mountain. So it's literally spatially in place, in time-space continuum in the place, this place would become sacred there too. Another test would occur. So that's an interesting tie geographically, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I think that's probably what we're supposed to see. It's obviously, like you said, the polygamy resulted in this terrible, awful sin of Abraham, who is not really the hero of the story. And Sarah isn't either, right? But God comes through, he sees, and he takes care of Ishmael. He takes care of his mom. He provides.
He's a hero of the story. I mean, I still understand that.
Yeah.
We're supposed to look up to Abraham and respect his radical faith in this situation.
Yeah.
I also, and there have been stories written about this, Son of Laughter, etc. But the impact on this very secondary character of Isaac, and the idea that he continues to live a life of faith after this incident, where I think very clearly, if he's going to have a life of faith after this, it can't be passed down from his parents. He's got to own it himself.
Yeah.
Right? Because he was about to be cut off.
Yeah.
Literally.
Well, at the very least, we know that it did not affect his belief in Yahweh, because he continued in his faithfulness. So that this event in and of itself taught him, which I think teaches us that this story also is not just about testing Abraham to see what he's made of. And we do see what he's made of, but it also in a real way shows us what God's made of. Tim Keller famously said, if we could go back in time and we would see Abraham and the angel calls out, stop, now I know how much you love me, stop. And if Abraham could somehow be transported to the foot of the cross several thousand years later, he would say to God, stop, now I know how much you love me, that you're not willing to withhold your one and only son for my benefit. And so, I mean, we're supposed to make those links. And this is a story also about God and his willingness to provide and to sacrifice. And it's interesting because, and this is where our the Jewish scholars are so good on this. And sometimes this, like to your point, this just gets glossed over or sanitized, I think might be the right, spiritualized. It's like, oh no, this is actually real. Later on, there would be a call to worship at the foot of Sinai. And this is still used to this day on, Jewish high holy days like Yom Kippur, they blow a particular instrument to bring people to worship. And the thing that they blow is called a shofar, which is the horn of a ram. And this is a tie back because this is the first time in scripture the idea of a ram's horn is used. And there's this Jewish scholar, Benjamin Cohen, who said, I love this quote. He said, if you want to go to court, you take a good lawyer. The shofar's like a good lawyer. It reminds God of Abraham's obedience and being willing to sacrifice that which was more dear to him than even life itself. And when you hear the shofar, you recall the binding of Isaac, and you count it to your credit as if you yourself were bound to the altar before God. So he's saying that even the shofar is a reminder of worship. And it's saying, listen, I want to be like Abraham. I want to put everything on the altar because I know what you've done, God. I know what you've done too. So it's a tie back to worship. And I thought that was pretty fascinating,
That's fascinating. And if I understand the quote the way you read it, not only is it saying, I want to be like Abraham, it's acknowledging I am like Isaac. I'm bound here. I'm helpless before you, God.
Yes.
Have mercy on me.
Yes. Yes. And what's the whole point of the story? The Lord will provide. The Lord will provide. That's what we're supposed to take away from it. It says it multiple times. Jehovah Jireh, God will provide. And what will he provide? When everything falls apart, he will make a way, and it will be God who actually provides the sacrifice here. And God will provide. And that's when everything falls apart. And unfortunately, sometimes in life, things really do fall apart, where it feels like our entire world's about to implode. We can count on God somehow to provide, even if it doesn't make sense to us. He'll provide. And that's, I think, one of the major lessons from this story. It's not just about Abraham passing the test. In some ways, it's about God passing the test in our hearts,
Yeah, that's a great way to close. This has been Character Study, episode 7, Isaac. One more in the season. We'll tie it all together. We'll wrap it up.
All righty.
It was great spending this time with you.
All right. Good talk.